Hey guys, so today I thought I would have a slightly different video for you. What I wanted to talk to you about today was the time my parents tried to arrange my marriage. Now I say the time, it was actually multiple times, and it's a really interesting story because I find anyway, and I've told this story quite a lot, like to my friends and stuff. It's just kind of one of my stock stories that I enjoy telling, and I think people find really interesting as well, because it's a different culture, and it just provides a bit of an insight into the Asian community, or my particular Asian community, because there's not one type of Asian, obviously, and there's not one type of community. So within a larger community you get pockets. So I thought it was interesting to give you a little bit of an insight into mine. So now I am in my mid-30s, and what I'm going to tell you now is what happened to me in my early 20s. There's a lot of changes that have happened in a decade, not only to myself, but also to the culture as well. I don't know of many people who do get into arranged marriages. Now, I don't know if that's because my surroundings have changed, what I see on Facebook and my younger cousins. It seems to be the norm now to choose your own partner. When I was growing up, it was, I wouldn't say it was 50-50. I still think most people chose their partner in my friend circle. I would say maybe about 20% were helped along with the arranged marriage system. And my parents, they were super keen on the arranged marriage just because I didn't have a boyfriend, and I wasn't super into relationships and stuff like that. I was very much wanting to focus on my career. I was really into education. The story begins when I'm around 22, and that's when they decided, right, we need to get her married off. And I don't know why they chose such a young age. Like, my parents themselves didn't get married until fairly late in life. I just don't know. I think my parents are like super concerned about the future. They're a bit like me as well. I'm very kind of cautious and pragmatic, and maybe they were being super cautious. They decided, right, now is the time, now is the appropriate time to get her married off, which is insane. 22 is just insanely young. I think it's different if you've been in a relationship from school and you've been childhood sweethearts and you've been together for 6 years. That's fine. You might be ready to move on to the next step. At 22, you know, I hadn't even discovered clubbing and like all sorts of stuff. I was quite sheltered, and I was quite a sensible like person. I've always been quite sensible, so I was always just like, oh, I'm going to live my life after university and stuff. So there were so many things that I wanted to discover. I wanted to travel. I wanted to like go down the bloody nightclub and stuff more, and I really wanted to indulge like my partying phase. So I was definitely not up for it, but my parents were super up for it. So what they did was they told all their friends, like, oh yeah, by the way, we're on the lookout. Sim's on the lookout. Sorry, that's my phone just going off. Sim's on the lookout for someone, as if they like told my aunts and stuff like that. They're not actually my aunts. Like in the Bengali community or the Asian community, you can call your parents' friends aunts and uncles and stuff, just as a sign of respect. So they told all my aunts and uncles, and biodata started coming through. Now, biodata is like a CV, but it's not like a work CV, it's like a marriage CV. So you give your height, your skin tone, and that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, skin tone for me particularly has never been very important, and neither to my parents. Like, we weren't like, oh, the guy has to be fair, because fair skin is often like seen as more appealing in our society, but we do have like darker people in our family who we consider absolutely beautiful, so it wasn't something that was super important to us. And I don't think even in my biodata that they made me like create for myself. Humiliating experience, by the way, that I even entered my skin color, but I did have to provide a photo, so they had like a view of like what I looked like anyway. And you have to put your height because Asians can be quite short. The guys tend to put a couple of inches above what they actually are, but I don't think it's a big deal. So another thing also that used to really annoy me is the fact that the aunts and uncles used to participate and get these biodatas through. Now, part of me understands, because my parents were so adamant that I really wanted to get married and were feeding them incorrect truth. And I think it's because they genuinely wanted it so much that they were like making things up in their head and really believing it. But I feel like the aunts and uncles should have known a little bit better, should have probably consulted me before sending through all these biodatas, because it's really difficult when you're that young. When you do like your parents and you do respect them, you don't want to have this huge ruckus, have this huge fight with them all the time. You're living in their house. I feel that the aunts and uncles made it more difficult for me by sending through all these men. They managed to find this one guy called and they thought he was the perfect match for me, and it was ridiculous. I don't even know why they thought he was a perfect match. I think actually what it was is his family and my family were kind of similar in terms of education. Oh, and that's another thing I need to mention. In the bar daters, all the families' kind of previous history is there in terms of what they do for a profession, how far they've been educated, and they just try to match you up on paper form to be as similar as they can. And I'll go into that in a second as to like the thinking and the logic behind it. So they found this guy for me. He was a doctor, and they love a doctor. My family thinks like doctors are the best. I super admire that profession as well, and as I've gotten older and as older relatives have had to need medical treatment, as I've had more contact with the NHS, I absolutely admire that profession. But it's not like, you know, I'm on a hunt to marry a doctor. Anyway, so he was a doctor, and he had a flat of his own, and they were super impressed by all of that, and it is very impressive. But bear in mind, I'm 22. I'm not looking for a doctor who owns a flat in London. It's definitely not something that I've got in my head. So we went on a couple of dates, and it was crap. It was rubbish. He was a nice guy, but the thing is, I wasn't super experienced, as I said, about boys. I hadn't had a lot of dates. I didn't even know if this was normal or not. I didn't really like him. I didn't get the vibe that he liked me, although after every date my mum assured me that she knew that he was really into me. I just touched on the fact that I was going to explain why parents are so keen to try and get the culture and the education level and all of that so kind of similar. And the reasoning behind that is they think that the chances of you splitting up in future are less. Like, they feel that that way you're much more compatible. They're trying to guarantee that you won't split up and there will be no disharmony in the future relationship. But one thing I feel that first generation parents always forget about like their second generation kids is that although the kids look like them, like I look like my parents, you know, I look Asian, very Asian, they forget that just because you look one way doesn't mean that culturally you will 100% be exactly like them. I'm like a real fusion between British and Bengali, and that's why Andrew and I get on so well. I feel that our cultures, he's Scottish, which is a very kind of open, friendly culture, and I feel that it has a fair amount of similarity with the Bengali side, and it fuses really well. Like I feel like the two of us have a shared culture, and I have much more in common with him than any man that I've met before, or really my parents either. We think similarly, our values are very similar, so even though we look very different, like he couldn't look more Scottish if he tried, even though we look very different and our backgrounds are very different, culturally and value-wise we are very similar. So hopefully that will stand us in good stead for the future. I had this date with, and I think we had 3 dates, and I have to tell you, like, the whole process made me feel awful. It made me feel like a piece of castle. It made me feel like all the kind of work that I'd done throughout university, at school, was demeaned, and all I was seen was just like somebody who needs to be married off. Now, I don't know if other people feel the same way in terms of arranged marriage, and I think for some people it works, and the stats are actually quite good when it comes to arranged marriages and stuff. But you also have to think about other things that come into play. Like my parents, they met through an arranged marriage, but the chances of them getting divorced was very, very low, because in that previous generation, my mum was financially dependent on my father. Divorce was very looked down upon, and it's not like she would have had a community that would have really supported her. She would have actually been blamed if they were to have split up. I'm not saying that my parents were going to split up. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't even in her head, I don't think, for the previous generation. And that's why stats are so high, because arranged marriages were more frequent and the chances of people divorcing was much less likely given the social circumstances. So what I'm actually trying to say is this video is in no way against arranged marriages. I think if it works for you, go for it. It's just another way of meeting somebody. So after like 3 dates, he was just like, look, Sim, this isn't working for me. I am actually in love with another girl and I really want to be with her. And I was just like, okay, fine. So why don't you tell your mom and dad? And he's like, I have told them, but they won't let me marry her. And I was just like, why? Well, like, why not? And apparently she was Bengali as well, but she was basically in a different kind of social class to him, and he was really disappointed that his parents had taken that stance, and he said he was disappointed that this was their outlook in life and that it was something that he had never expected. So we left it at that. I told my parents, like, look, he doesn't want to go forward with this, and internally I was just like so happy and stuff. They were obviously devastated. They were just so like, oh my god, you know, like this is awful, like whatever. They were grief stricken, but it is what it is. Like, you couldn't force him to marry me. So fast forward 10 years later, like, circumstances have changed a lot, and I actually met his wife at like a family, not a family function. It was the aunt that I met him through. Her own daughter was actually getting married. So we went there and we saw this beautiful woman with 2 young kids, and I was just like, oh, that girl is like really pretty. She had on this lovely sari and stuff. And then my mom was just like, by the way, that's like wife. And it turns out that's the girl that he was telling me about, the one that he was actually in love with. And his parents, I guess, after what happened with us, finally agreed for him to get married to her. And now they have a beautiful family. He's with the girl that he wants, and it was just a beautiful, happy ending. My mom was all like, oh my god, like, are you heartbroken? Are you feeling like super upset? And she's like, as if, like, we're talking over a decade ago. I'm over it, mum, and I wasn't even into it when the whole thing was happening. So after that incident, which was my first kind of big arranged marriage situation type incident, they did try a few more times, and every time I fought really, really hard with them. I think because it was the first experience of us going through this whole rigmarole, that was the one that I kicked up the most fuss about, and that was the one that actually went the furthest. Going forward, I was very, very adamant, and they were also getting a bit exhausted about the amount of, like, how much I was fighting them, because they were like, listen to us, we know what's best for you. We know, I don't know where they became like these relationship gurus from. They have one marriage and they think they know it all. And my mom used to say stuff like, don't worry, after you marry him, you can change him. Anyway, so I had a few more kind of setups. Most notably, I had one in Bangladesh. I went on holiday, and that is one of the reasons why I haven't gone back to Bangladesh for so long, is because I went and they really tried to hook me up with this guy. They almost tried to get me like engaged, and I was just like, no. But to be honest, I was quite relaxed because I knew I was coming back to the UK, and it's just like, go forward as far as you want. Like, I'm not even going to be here. So, but because I was hounded by all the time, like, oh, aren't you going to get married? Aren't you going to get married? I just decided, like, right, next time I'm going to Bangladesh, I'm either going back with somebody, or I'm just not going to, or I'll be so old that they're going to think like, you know, the ship sailed. And my dad, mom and dad, they calmed down a lot when I hit 27. I think by that point, because the biodaters weren't coming through anymore, because like everybody who wanted to get arranged marriages and stuff had kind of got like married off, or they just people had found people. So they were kind of like, oh crap, the ship has sailed. And then they were saying stuff like, okay, you need to focus on your career. Because we used to fight about my career a lot as well. I actually went to law school. I went to London School of Economics to study law. And then after I graduated, I even completed the bar vocational course, which means you can be a barrister. But the thing is, and that's because my dad's a barrister. But the thing is, I never wanted or ever thought seriously that I was going to practice. I always knew that I wanted to be in the creative field. So like what I do right now is video journalism, but I also want to make films. I want to make educational documentaries. Though that's where my interest lies, that's where my passion is. So like growing up, or in my 20s, it was all like arguments about not getting married and arguments about not pursuing the whole kind of law thing. And at that point I wasn't like in a good job. Now I am, luckily, touch wood, oh, I'm trying to find some wood to touch, luckily, touch wood, I'm in a decent job. I'm very happy with where I am. I work at a really large website. It's supported by a huge multinational media company, and I get to do a lot of things, and my parents get to see that. So even though they don't really understand the internet and how I make money and how I have a living, they do see that, you know, I get to travel around, I do have some opportunities, and by the superficial things they understand it's a good job, but they don't really understand my job. But whatever, I mean, it's a much better position than it used to be, and we used to argue like cats and dogs over it. So that kind of brings me to, I guess, the present time. So I met Andrew a couple of years ago. We're very, very happy. My parents now see that it's a much better match for me than what they had planned. They're very happy that I am finally getting married off. I think part of them, although they won't like admit it, kind of feared that I wouldn't get married. And actually, to be honest with you, it wasn't something that was really in my plans. It just happened to happen. I'm very happy that it's happened, but like it wasn't something that was in my future plans or my life goals and stuff. So it's all worked out pretty well for me, and I guess I just wanted to share this story. If any young Asian females are watching this in their early 20s and are going through the same thing as me, it will pass. You stick to your guns. You know what is right for you. Nobody else knows you the way that you know yourself. Nobody else will know the goals that you have for yourself in the future. If you stick at it, if you just hold on to your beliefs and your principles, you will finally get to where you want to be. In the end, it's something that I firmly believe. So I want to put that message out there as well, just in case anybody who relates to this story and is younger and is going through what I went through back in the day. So that kind of wraps us up. We're at the end of this video. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed telling the story. I've been talking away for like an hour or so, so I have some heavy duty editing to do. But yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this video, because I really enjoyed this video much more than I thought I would, because I actually do get a little bit nervous talking to the camera. Anyway, so I will leave you there and I will see you all next week. Bye!